Welcome to the podcast, From One Mother of an Addict to Another. This is a space of sharing heartfelt personal experiences, insightful thoughts, and powerful suggestions, which can hopefully assist and offer strength navigating your journey alongside a loved one facing addiction and mental illness.
Welcome to the episode, Choosing the Right Rehab. I think it's really funny because I look back now on when I was looking for a rehab and I knew nothing about rehabs. I remember the therapist telling me it really doesn't matter. And I'd be like, what are you talking about? Like, don't they need to have, like, what kind of activities do they have? Amenities. I want to make sure it's nice and he's with nice people and they're going to look after him. And I don't know, I'm nervous. I don't want to just put him somewhere and he's not going to get the right help. So let's start there. You could send them to the most exclusive, expensive rehab on the planet. And they're still going to come out the way they want to come out. Either they want to get help or they don't. It doesn't matter if they're in a 5-star resort or a 1-star. And if anything, you're better at putting them in a 1-star resort. So my experience was I wanted them to stay in the state of Florida. Now you need to figure out, what do you want afterwards? Because no matter where you're going to send them, that's where they'll do their outpatient therapy afterwards. That's where they'll typically live. And start like new again for as long as that lasts, and hopefully a long time. But you have to expect that wherever your kid does rehab, that's where they're going to be living afterwards, in a halfway house nearby. That's the typical next step. And then you hope that they get their outpatient therapy there, and then hopefully they can integrate back into society and start working, going back to school. They'll go to AA meetings. They'll go to all kinds of meetings to help them stay on the right path. So going back to my experience, I actually called a rehab center and said, well, it's his birthday's coming up. So am I going to be allowed to, like, what, should I send him a cake? Like, what, how does this work? They literally cracked up when I said that. They're like, are you serious? Yeah, I was. But the truth is after my third rehab stunt with him, I realized, what was I thinking? It doesn't matter. The first rehab I put him in was whatever I could afford, because I didn't know where to go, what to look for. So I decided, okay, I'm going to call all these places in Florida, because I want him to be at least in driving distance so I could go visit him if I wanted to, and maybe he'd end up staying there. So think about that. Have a rehab center that's an hour away, 2 hours away, maybe even 3 hours away, driving distance. So you don't have to worry about getting on a plane if you want to see them, but you're at a distance. They shouldn't be coming back to your home. They should be going into a halfway house after. So now let's talk about, all right, do you really need to care about what this rehab looks like? No, it doesn't matter. If your insurance will cover, if they take insurance, send them there. If you don't have insurance, then if they're 18 years old, apply for him for disability and see what insurance will cover him in a rehab. Now, I remember the first time I was going to put my son in rehab, I called all over and every place said the same thing. Oh, it's $30,000. Oh, it's $50,000. Okay, you can give me $25,000 today and then give me the rest in a month. Well, I did it the first time, and then I realized, ooh, no, that's not the way this is going to go again. Because I realized afterwards that literally the day after, he started smoking pot, and then it just spiraled from there. He kept lying to me. So basically, what you have to understand is that It's not about what money. It's not about paying for something. It's not about putting him somewhere safe. It's about getting him help. And it really is going to depend, I found, on the therapists that are there. Because at the end of the day, sometimes someone somewhere in that situation, in that rehab, is going to get to him. Maybe, maybe not. Now, it also depends. Did he want to go, or did you push him to go? Did you make that decision for him, or he came to you and said, I want to go? These are two different ways. But no matter what, the second you know that he's going to need to go, or they're going to need to go to rehab, you should already start looking into a place. You should have the phone number ready, because either you're going to give them the ultimatum, they could go to rehab, or they're going to have to leave the house. If they have to leave the house, whenever they come back to call you that they need help, be it 30 days or 60 days, whatever that's going to be, you'll be prepared because you'll have the rehab center in your hand. If it's not that and they decide they will go, that would be amazing, and you'll have that ready. I would look into rehabs, again, that are like 2 hours away from where you live, maybe a little further. Now, also be prepared to be able to say that after they get out of rehab, when that time comes, that you're going to be prepared to put him in some kind of halfway house where they will drug test him and they will give him outpatient therapy. Now, this all sounds easy. It isn't. A lot of times it depends on where you want to get him help. If you want to send him out of state, why? Because you think if you put him further away, you're not going to see it. It's someone else's problem. Because that's not how it works, and it ends up not being that way. If anything, it becomes more of a hassle, and the kid ends up coming back eventually, and then it's like they're starting over once again. Sometimes it pays, depending on if you feel that they'll feel more comfortable out of state. In a warmer climate, let's say you live in a colder environment, I don't really think it matters. Again, it's all going to depend on if they really want to go or not. So put that guilt aside. I know someone that sent their kid to Malibu to a $50,000 a month rehab. Oh, that kid was with very famous people's kids, and oh boy, he had the time of his life, and he was set up. Literally a week later, he was already smoking pot. Really, seriously, what a waste. What did you spend money on? Exactly. I don't care if you're rich or you're poor. You're entitled to the same exact rehab. And don't think that because you're rich, you're going to get a better rehab center and better services than if you're poor. Just get something that is covered over your insurance. You want to go check it out from the outside, make sure it's half decent? Fine. It doesn't matter. Because at the end of the day, they have to want to get help. And if they do, that environment, they will find and gravitate to the person where they could relate to and get help. And hopefully get that camaraderie with the people around them. They're going to have to share rooms. They don't get their own room. They're going to have to share rooms. They're going to have to share dinners. They're going to have to learn how to prepare dinner, take care of themselves, make sure their rooms are clean, and then address the mental health issues. Because it's not like you go in and you say, okay, I have mental health issues, I'm going to get into a rehab center. No. It already is a given that most likely you have some sort of mental illness with your addiction. So first they have to clean you of the addiction, and then the mental illness piece comes in. And that's where a lot of the therapy comes in, and that's when they figure out what you really need, if you have psychosis, if you had psychosis before you came in, and what kind of meds you're going to need. I believe, and what my experience has been from 3 times of rehab for my son, that they need time. They need time to clean their bodies out of the drugs, the alcohol, their way of life, their way of thinking. It takes 6 months, 7 months, up to a year that they're clean when they start thinking clearly. So I know that when my son went to a psychiatrist and they're like, oh, he has bipolar or he has this, or they started putting him on meds. He didn't like the meds. He already said, I'm going to diagnose myself. I don't have anything wrong with me. I don't have mental illness. I was just taking drugs. Well, that's not true because we know he was hallucinating many times already. So obviously that's not how that's going to go. But they like to diagnose themselves. They're going to think they know everything because they're belligerent, and they're going to inform you of that. So even if you go to a psychiatrist, and I was going with him, so I knew that he'd be attending the meetings, that again is useless because after the first couple of times, he wasn't even showing up to meet me. So that is something that is useless as well. Because again, it comes down to if they want to get help, they have to do it on their own. So the first thing to do is, if you're going to keep them in state, then you look at a place somewhere that's an hour, 2 hours away. Find something that may be covered on your insurance. Keep calling to find a place that's going to take insurance. Tell them you have no money, absolutely no money, and you need a place for rehab for your son or daughter. And then look into putting them on disability since they are 18 years old. I wish I would have known about that years ago. That would have been amazing, but I didn't. Because every time they do that every time they start their lives over, I was the one putting that money out. I was the one setting him up in apartments. I was the one getting him all the help and paying for everything when he couldn't work. They can't work right away. It's like, I remember in rehab, so like when they came out in the halfway house, the only way to stay in the halfway house if they had a job. Really? They're not prepared to have jobs yet. They have to get their lives in order. They have to get their brains back intact. They can't be stressed about where they're going to work. They have to figure out like how they're going to stay clean. And that is the biggest problem. Now, I'm going to suggest that they stay in at least 3, 4 months, 5 months. As long as you can keep them in the rehab, keep them there. That 1 month, it's useless. 3 months is better. 6 months, amazing. So whatever you could do with insurance, do it. And then have the rehab center will work with you on that. I know that the centers definitely take insurance more than they did back then. But I suggest you really look for any place that takes insurance. And if they say, well, whatever insurance doesn't cover, you'll have to cover, say to them like this, well, if you don't want them, no problem, I'll go somewhere else. But if you're willing to take them, then whatever my insurance takes, all yours. And I'd like to make sure that he'd be able to stay there for at least 3 to 4 months, if not longer, should the therapy and whatever insurance company is asking for, that they approve it and he could stay longer. That's something that I would suggest would be your first angle. You make sure you have the phone number on you at all times, because if your child is out of the house already and they're calling you for help, all you do is give them that number to call, and those people will come get your child wherever they are. So that's one. Number two, or they might have to get on a plane, or they might have to take a bus or an Uber. You don't give them money. You don't give them money to buy a ticket. You buy the ticket. They pick it up at the airport. You buy the Uber. You set it up, and they take the Uber. No money. You could give them a pack of cigarettes. You could give them a tuna sandwich. That's it. And then they go on their way. That's how it works. Now, I'm telling you right now, I enabled and I did it differently the first 2 times. Now, the other thing is that when it comes to which rehab, I spoke to other people. Once your child goes to the first rehab and you set it up, you constantly speaking with different people at different rehabs, and you'll get a chance to see the type of people or the way they do therapy, or how many therapists they have on staff. That is really important. They need the one-on-one therapy. Group therapy is great. They should be in that all day because they need it all day. But one-on-one therapy, they need just as much. So the first question I would ask is, how much therapy do you have there? How much one-on-one therapy do you have? If my insurance will cover it for more days, will you give him more private therapy during those days? Those are questions to ask when you are deciding on which rehab you're going to send them to. It's not about the amenities. It's not about what you're feeding them. No. It's not about, are they sharing a room? Will they have their own room? No. Do they go on a field trip? No. That is not what you ask. What you ask is exactly what I said. How many therapists do you have on staff? Do you cater to mental illness as well? So it's dual rehab, which would be mental illness with the addiction. Do you do some kind of after treatment, outpatient treatment as well? So if they live nearby, do they come back to the center? Now, one other place I would look is if you have a hospital or like a university nearby or like within your state that's 2 or 3 hours away, they often have programs. They have these kind of programs that are matched up with rehab centers. So that is really something to look into. And they have all these kind of research centers, and I wish I would have known about that sooner, but I didn't. So that's something to look into as well. So again, when you're going out to choose that rehab, amenities is at the bottom of the list. It's, do you want your child nearby for convenience, for after the fact, or do you want them to be in a totally different state, which is fine. I know a lot of people that have done that. That's okay. Florida is a huge place for rehabs, okay? California, huge place for rehabs. If that's what you want, North Carolina, South Carolina, you look into these places, Georgia, there are places that have a lot of rehabs. So that could be for you too. But I chose, and I would choose again, to have them within 2 hours or an hour of where you live in order to have that comfort of going to see them after rehab, going to meet with them maybe once a week when they're in the outpatient and they're in a halfway house, to build up that relationship again and have conversations with them one-on-one, to start building your relationship and your confidence in each other, and knowing that you're both there for each other, and that knowing that they've got to do this and that you're here to support them, but not to make these decisions for them. Okay, I hope this helps. And again, you're not doing anything wrong. You can't do anything wrong. It doesn't matter which one you choose, because they're going to have to bring the best of it out of that rehab. So stick with that and see what happens. There is no wrong rehab.
Thanks for tuning in. I trust this episode brought you insight and strength, offering valuable coping strategies. Stay connected with weekly content, plus follow if you enjoyed, and be sure to journal for your own self-care.